A Democratic state lawmaker in Illinois has introduced legislation requiring unvaccinated residents to pay out of pocket for healthcare services. It's all part of an effort to come up with new and creative ways to punish people who refuse to get the jab. Jonathan Carroll's legislation would amend the state's insurance code so that a person who is eligible to receive the jab and chooses not to be vaccinated shall pay for health care expenses out of pocket if the person becomes hospitalized because of symptoms. In other words, Carroll is trying to ensure that the unvaccinated will be denied health insurance for COVID treatments, even in cases where private insurance is already bought and paid for. Moreover, intervening in private insurance won't even be necessary in many cases, since 1/3 of the population is already receiving government-funded health care. This policy is quite remarkable coming from a progressive like Carroll. After all, for decades, we've been hearing from the left that healthcare is a human right and that it must be provided to anyone and everyone at taxpayer expense. Anything short of universal state-subsidized healthcare, we've been told, is unacceptable. Yet, apparently, the mandatory vaccine advocates, found largely on the left, of course, are so obsessed with forcing mandatory jabs on the entire population that they're now looking for ways to deny people healthcare. But we should have seen this coming. Until recently, the left has also claimed it wants universal employment and a chicken in every pot. But since the Biden administration hatched the idea of tying employment to vaccines earlier this year, advocates of vaccine mandates now want you to be destitute and jobless if you refuse the jab. The same mandate pushers have also cleverly engineered their vaccine mandates to ensure that should you be fired for refusing the shot, you'll be ineligible for unemployment insurance. Although the mandates are being forced on employers in many cases, state policymakers have concluded that termination for refusing the vaccine constitutes being fired for cause. This makes it possible to deny unemployment insurance to these dissenters. It turns out healthcare, jobs, and a social safety net aren't rights after all. Now, vaccine mandate advocates have decided both social programs and regulatory powers can be cynically employed as a means of gaining compliance from citizens. In the United States, the federal government has been slowly building up to this for some time. For example, if mandate advocates want to pursue a permission to work scheme, we need look no further than the E-Verify program long pushed by anti-immigration advocates. It's a federal database designed to deny employment to people without the proper immigration paperwork. One need not be an oracle to see how similar regulatory infrastructure could be used to closely tie vaccination status to employment. A lesson here is that the infrastructure of a potential medical surveillance state has already been laid down by programs and regulations that didn't have anything to do with vaccine passports. In all this, the U.S. is following in the footsteps of more centralized states where resources are more centrally planned. The growth of both the regulatory state and the welfare state have paved the way for new ways of gaining compliance on vaccines, and potentially on most everything else. We should expect to see regulatory powers used extensively in any area where these powers have already been confirmed. For example, Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia has already introduced legislation tying the right to travel by rail or air with vaccine compliance. In the U.S., however, limits on the police powers and regulatory powers of the federal government will likely prove to be something of an impediment in this regard. Thus, we should expect the federal government to be using financial power over government contractors and grantees, as we've already seen, to gain compliance. But if millions of Americans also depend on government welfare checks of various sorts, then the regulatory state won't even be necessary. The regime need only hold out the carrot of social benefits to get what it wants. In this regard, potential universal basic income proposals could be especially helpful to the regime. A universal basic income program could be employed as a carrot to win over the public to all sorts of government mandates and requirements. The equation is simple. The regime need only say, do this thing and you'll get $1,000 per month. This free money could then be tied to compliance with any number of mandates dreamed up by government agencies. When most of the population relies on the state for healthcare or a monthly check, the possibilities are virtually endless. The main thing you should take away from this video is simple. Learn to simplify your life today while things are still good. The days of having excess might be coming to an end. We have been conditioned to want more than we need for the moment because we live in the land of plenty. Prioritize productivity over consumption and don't forget to remain grateful for what you have today.